In methodological individualism, emergent social phenomena do not appear. Social structures are theorized only as patterns in individual action, and are ultimately explained entirely in terms of the meaningful and motivated actions of individuals. Weber states this position explicitly in his methodological comments at the opening of Economy and Society. Sociology is a science concerning itself with the interpretive understanding of social action, and thereby with a causal explanation of its cause and consequences. A social relationship is the behavior of a plurality of actors insofar as, in its meaningful content, the action of each takes account of that of the others and is oriented in these terms. It thus consists entirely and exclusively in the existence of a probability that there will be a meaningful course of action irrespective of the basis of that probability. Power is the probability that one actor within a social relationship will be in a position to carry out his own will, despite resistance, regardless of the basis on which this probability rests. Domination is the probability that a command with a given specific content will be obeyed by a given group of persons, and legitimacy is the probability that action will actually be so governed by belief in the existence of a legitimate order. What we could call social structures, Weber does not give the term structure a central place in his conceptual vocabulary, exist only as clouds of probability generated by the causal effects of subjectively meaningful motives on the actions of individuals. Structures have no independent existence of their own. In Weber's view, the common sense way of speaking that says, for example, the US sent more troops to Iraq this week, or the North abolished slavery, express a conceptual mistake that of treating the combined actions of many people as if they were the single action of a single person. This is not pernicious in all contexts, but it has no place in sociology, Weber says. For still other cognitive purposes, for instance, juristic ones, or for practical ones, it may on the other hand be convenient or even indispensable to treat social collectivities, such as states, associations, business corporations, foundations, as if they were individual persons, but for the subjective interpretation of action in sociological work, these collectivities must be treated as solely the resultants and modes of organization of the particular acts of individual persons, since these alone can be treated as agents in the course of subjectively understandable actions. When reference is made in a sociological context to a state, a nation, a corporation, a family, or an army corps, or to similar collectivities, what is meant is, on the contrary, only a certain kind of development of actual or possible social actions of individual persons. End of quote. As far as terms like Microsoft or the Roman Catholic Church or the state of Alabama are concerned, Weber insists that, though extremely pedantic and cumbersome, it would be possible, if purposes of sociological terminology alone were concerned, to eliminate such terms entirely and substitute newly coined words. For Weber, all explanations of social life that make recourse to notions of institutions or collectivities must be reducible to explanations in terms of individual action. This rigorous methodological individualism accounts for Weber's conviction that sociology cannot answer moral questions. I am emphatically opposed to the view that a realistic science of morality, in the sense of a demonstration of the factual influences exercised on the ethical convictions which prevail at any given time in a group of human beings by their other conditions of life, and in turn by the ethical convictions on the conditions of life, would produce an ethics which could ever say anything about what ought to be the case. The one and only result which can ever be achieved by empirical, psychological, and historical investigation of a particular value system as influenced by the individual, social, and historical causes is its interpretive explanation. That is no small achievement. End of quote. Weber's position on this question is rather complex because his view is certainly not that value judgments are to be withdrawn from scientific discussion in general, simply because in the last analysis they rest on certain ideas and are therefore subjective in origin. In Weber's analysis, science can address questions of value in several ways as technical criticism, by making clear the causal sequence of actions necessary to reach a given end, and thereby the practical cost of achieving that end. Hermeneutically, by drawing out an empirically accurate and logically consistent account of the ideas that inform a given end and make it variable, and critically, by testing the internal consistency of a desired end in light of the content and implications of the axiomatic principles from which the end is purportedly derived. However, empirical science cannot go further than these tasks, which amount to clarifying what a person involves themselves in when they take on one or another value commitment. Specifically, science cannot judge the validity of cultural values. The normative scope of science is bounded by the dependence of science itself on subjectively generated cultural values. Weber says, the objective validity of all empirical knowledge rests exclusively upon the ordering of the given reality according to categories which are subjective in a specific sense, namely that they present the presuppositions of our knowledge and are based on the presupposition of the value of those truths which empirical knowledge alone is able to give us. It should be remembered that belief in the value of scientific truth is the product of certain cultures and is not product of man's original nature. And furthermore, the objectivity of the social sciences depends rather on the fact that the empirical data are always related to those evaluative ideas which alone make them worth knowing, and the significance of the empirical data is derived from these evaluative ideas. But these data can never become the foundation for the empirically impossible proof of the validity of the evaluative ideas. End of quote. Empirically speaking, in Weber's view, all ultimate values, including both moral values and epistemic values, exist objectively within individual subjectivities and as such are purely the property of individuals. Every individual carries inside herself or himself an ensemble of beliefs about right and wrong. These beliefs cause people to be likely to act in certain ways and not others. Weber affirms that science can study the internal meaning and coherence of moral beliefs, their logical implications for action, and their probable social effects. However, from an individualistic view, it follows that these beliefs do not refer to any external, objective reality that is empirically accessible, and so science cannot pronounce moral beliefs correct or incorrect. It's not that all moral views are equally correct or incorrect, but that the notion of correctness does not apply scientifically to morals, any more than it applies to the destination of a journey. While one individual may judge another individual's ultimate moral values correct or incorrect on the basis of their own ultimate values, to a scientist, the differing moral convictions of individuals are merely empirical phenomena to be explained causally. Thus, we can read Weber's polytheism of values as one expression of his epistemic strategy. Any methodologically individualist sociology of morality will imply a similar polytheism, unless it makes recourse one of two additional elements, either a theory of human nature capable of showing certain values to be determined by that nature, or a metaphysical essentialism, such as a Kantian a priori, that sanctions particular values through a mechanism not accessible to a purely naturalistic science. Whatever his private beliefs, Weber did not include either of these in the foundational statements of his scientific method. However, this did not preclude him from taking moral stands, nor from putting science at the service of deeply ethical ends. Consider again the critical function of science capable of showing the necessary causal preconditions, the full hermeneutic ramifications, and the unintended consequences attendant on any given value rational course of action. Weber's science is still a sociology of action, and as such it examines a universe in which human beings act, not in isolation but in relation to each other. Indeed, orientation to the actions of another is one of the defining features of social action as such. Any social actor, with her own values and motives, encounters others as others with their own values and motives, upon which the success of one's own action depends. Nor is this an equal world. Society is fundamentally stratified by various forms of class, by status, and by power and domination. It is amidst such constraints, and not in any transcendental domain, that actors must form their values and make moral choices. We cannot create our values in practice through sheer force of will. Moreover, even the most successful actions have causal ramifications that exceed the knowledge, and hence the control, of those who perform them. The Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, for instance, may perhaps be read more fruitfully as a case study in how a social project exceeded its originator's intentions than as an argument about the origins of capitalism. By conceptualizing the social realm in terms of the play of causality, Weber situated subjectivity amidst objective forces that radically exceed the will of the intending subject. Sociology illuminates the dynamics of these causal forces, reveals the conditions and the consequences of action. In this way, sociology extends the ability of subjects to act as they intend, but not infinitely, since the causal dynamics of social interaction are themselves objective forces. Values, 2. Change in response to sociological knowledge, as we discover that some intentions will necessarily produce outcomes contrary to our desires. Weber's science is thus a struggle for the freedom to make moral choices against the unknown and unintended constraints of social life. His personal ethics express this struggle. Values, he writes, are most valid when worked out in those innermost elements of the personality and developed in the struggle against the difficulties which life presents. The political actor he celebrates is the one who can join together passionate commitment to deeply felt personal values with an ethic of responsibility based on the ability to judge the objective constraints to subjectively motivated action. Politics, Weber writes, is a matter of boring down strongly and slowly through hard balls. Science sharpens the drill.